Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Welcome. This is the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Your host, Joey, the Italian Stallion Murray, joined as always by Russ, the Idea Guy Morgan. All right, Russ, I think someone has finally beat you out of being the idea guy. You agree?
Man, this interview is going to leave you wanting more. And
No
I don't
question.
mean like, come on, like you didn't give me anything. I mean like, keep talking. Please let it keep going. Joey, last year, Megan and I binge watched Netflix, the show The Office. And I went through all 46 seasons, and it seemed like about 7 nights.
Oh, wait, thank you for catching up with the rest of the world, Russ, because we watched them like 8 years ago.
At the end of it, it was like, but no, I don't want it to be over. No, actually, reality is the last season, it pretty much sucked. You know, when Steve Carell left, it's like, I wanted it to be over, but
yeah,
I didn't want it to be over while he was still in the show. And that's the way I felt as we were interviewing Pace Morby today, is he's just sharing creative finance and something that when you start thinking, look, I don't know, how long we've been doing interviews, Joey?
Oh, 2.5 years.
So we're roughly 150 interviews in. And at this point, I've heard about every strategy that exists in real estate until today.
Yeah, don't shut it off. Yeah, please don't shut it off. We just heard us say real estate. You're like, okay, I'm done with real estate.
But have you heard this strategy before?
No. This is brilliant.
It was one of those things. It's like, okay, would you like to know how to put zero down and not even have a mortgage in your name and have a rental property and make $1,000 a month?
Yeah, that's free cash flow.
How about, would you like to be able to find a way to even pay full retail for the property and still cash flow the deal?
Yeah, because, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges I've always heard, especially when you talk about like wholesaling a property, or fixing and flipping or any of these other strategies, is I got to convince somebody to sell me a $100,000 house for $60,000 to make any money.
Yeah, but if they don't have $40,000 of equity in the property, what if they owe 110?
Yeah, you're done.
Most people say they walk away from the deal. And Pace on our interview says, for every one of those deals you come across, send them my way. I want them. And if that doesn't intrigue you enough to stick around and listen to this podcast episode, I don't know what will. I just want you to know this is a really action-packed, value-producing interview with Pace Morby, and we're diving in right now. Okay, I've listened to at least 5 podcasts. I'm now an expert in the infinite banking process. Maybe not, but yet I would love to talk to somebody about it. How can they do it, Joey?
It's as simple as going to freecall.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. You can sign up for a short 15-minute call to see if this is a fit for you, and you can work with one of our coaches to financial freedom. Welcome into the show. We have Pace Morby joining us today. Pace, so glad to have you, man.
Thank you, guys. It's been a while since I've seen you. I think, when was that we actually saw each other? It was back in November of last year.
Yeah, I think it was November.
That was football season.
Birmingham, Alabama. I went to the football game there, the Alabama football game, and I had no idea what I was walking into because I'm not a big college football guy.
Yeah, that's a different world, bro.
Unbelievable. I'd never even been to that part of the country, and I was just like, man, I could live here. Like, this is so freaking cool how awesome this is.
Well, and just imagine, Joe, if he would have actually went to a real team's stadium, like what he would have expected. So I'm glad that we didn't set the bar too high by only sending you to an Alabama LSU game.
Unbelievable. Everybody told me that was like getting Super Bowl tickets.
It really is. Yeah. I'm an Auburn guy, Pace, which is like the arch rival of Alabama. So we have pot shots at each other constantly. But yeah, no, Alabama LSU is definitely Super Bowl worthy. And now that we're staring maybe potentially no football season, like that is one of those experiences that many wish that they would have been able to take in last year.
Yeah, that was a fun time, and it was a different time. I mean, obviously we're in the middle of summer of 2020. COVID is now kind of tapering down and everybody's getting back to work, but it seemed like eons ago that we saw each other last. So good to see you guys.
Well, Pace, for those who don't know enough about you, and if you're not on Instagram following Pace, you need to be, because he keeps it live, to say it lightly. But give our audience just a little bit of background of who you are and where you're at in your space.
So came from a contractor background. My dad was a contractor, came from a really big family, and that's how my dad kept food on the table. I became a contractor, obviously, because that was my circle of influence. I was a GC, building homes, renovating for about 10 years. And one of my big customers, I don't know if you guys have Open Door in your neck of the woods, but one of my big customers was Open Door. I was doing 50, 60 renovations a month for them, and doing a lot of business. And then somebody came to me and just said, man, you're the hardest working guy I've ever met. I want to sell my business to you if you'd be open to it. And I'm like, okay, what's your business? And they said, oh, well, I'm a wholesaler. I wholesale real estate, and I own a franchise called We Buy Ugly Houses, or Home Investors. You guys ever heard of that company?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I ended up buying this person's franchise back years ago. And I slowly phased out of construction, but I really just couldn't get myself out of construction because I had such a big company. And it wasn't until about 2017 that I had somebody, I was a contractor. I was funding all of his renovations for about 3-4 years. He would pay me, I'd go do $1 million of work for him. He'd pay me like 900 grand. Then I'd go do another $1 million of work. He'd pay me 950. And it would just be like that for years, and then till the point where it accumulated till he owed me about $500,000. And then he came to me and he says, hey, look, I've been basically running a Ponzi scheme where I've been using you against my lender, against my other lender, against my friends and family, and I've been running this Ponzi scheme unintentionally. And I really need you to help me out. I know you're doing well in the wholesale game, and I know you're doing well in all this other stuff. Could you help me get $300,000 put together so I could finish all these projects, and then I'll get you paid back everything? And I'm thinking, yeah, man, like I don't screw people over. My thought process is everybody has good intentions. And so I went and sold a bunch of my rental properties. I sold a bunch of things to accumulate $380,000 that he ended up needing. I dumped it into his business. And after he was able to, get all these houses back and make his lenders whole, I realized that I was really in third position behind a hard money lender in first position at 18%, a second lender at 12% that was now over leveraged. And any lien I put on the property as a contractor meant nothing. Right. Oh, wow. And I got a real big education in helping people that are just sucking the lifeblood out of you. And I got a letter, a bankruptcy letter. I was one of 48 people that he stole money from. And this was only 22 months ago, something like that. And so I just, I could complain, and I could cry, and I could be like, wow, this is horrible, and go through all the stuff. You can imagine what you go through when you lose. I think it was about $1 million is what it ended up being. And I could bellyache and cry, or I could freaking put my pants on and walk out the door and go make more money. And so what I did is that forced me to get out of construction, because I just said, no more letting people have my money, no more chasing down bills. And what I loved about wholesale, I'd been running my construction company and my wholesale simultaneously for a number of years. What I loved about wholesale is that when I finished a transaction, I actually got freaking paid, right? The title company would call me and go, hey, Mr. Morby, when are you going to stop by and get your check? I'm like, wow, somebody calling me and asking me when I'm getting paid. This is amazing.
That's a different call. Yeah.
It's a very different call. Whereas as a contractor, you're like, hey, when can I come pick up my check? I got my payroll. I got my workman's comp. I owe money, blah, 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 blah. Right. So I jumped out of construction because of that. In a lot of ways, him filing bankruptcy on me was one of the best things ever that could have ever happened to me, because I could not separate. It was a mindset thing of like, well, I know construction makes money. What if wholesale, or what if real estate doesn't work out? I really need to stay tied to this. This horse is already saddled. Why would I ever abandon this horse? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And the reality is the horse was going the wrong direction. And I wasn't doing anything fiscally responsible because I was just funding everybody's projects and whatever. So what I did at the time is my franchise, my HomeVestors franchise, the lead cost was getting so expensive at that time that when a phone call came into me, each phone call was costing me about $1,000 in lead cost for every phone call.
Wow.
Right. So the marketing mechanism was direct mail, billboards, TV, and radio. So honestly, some of the most expensive forms of media, right? No SMS, no cold calling, none of that stuff. And what happened is over time, as competition rose in wholesale, I really had to put myself in a position where I knew how to convert at a higher level. When you get $1,000 phone call, I don't care if it's 2:00 in the morning, you freaking pick up that phone, right? So if somebody calls off a direct mail letter or a billboard, every time that rang, I knew that cost me $1,000 in lead cost or marketing cost. So it got stressful. It got to a point where it got up to $1,400 per call. And I said, this isn't working. I either have to get better or I have to get creative. And that's when I went out and started learning about creative financing. And I said, I have to convert. I know there's leads. These leads have something like these sellers need to sell. They're going through something, but because there's not enough equity, I can't convert them. And so I took up a lot of education. I went and jumped into some mentorships. I went and jumped into some masterminds, which I'm still a member of. And I learned from guys who've been doing this business 70, 80 years. And then I kind of created my own method of what works for me and kind of how to marry it with wholesale. So fast forward to today, what I'm doing, I own 4 assisted living businesses, all that I bought all of them subject to. I bought all the houses subject to. I've got assisted living operating. We've got a big portfolio of rentals and lease options. We do a lot of mobile home development. I bought all the land on terms, and we can get into what that means in a little bit. I'm in my own home studio right now. I own this house subject to. I took this house over, no qualifications, didn't have to use a bank, didn't have to go through any of that stuff. It's amazing, right? And then we do a lot of fix and flips. And I have a web app that we've been developing all about door knocking and getting in front of sellers that are in distress. So doing a lot, having a lot of fun, and just grateful that I'm not a contractor anymore.
Well, I mean, it's good that
Wow.
sometimes it requires things like that to happen in our life, or that crisis or catastrophe to break us free. I was that same way. I mean, Pace, I was a typical financial planner. I was holding on to this like way that I knew was broken. But thankfully, when the market completely crashed, it allowed me to move away from that. All right. So going back to subject to, that's a term that may or may not be familiar to the person listening to you. So let's kind of take that really simply and move from really low, like Joey and I like to say, get the cookies on the lowest counter, so we can all reach them, right? And then we can kind of expand, because I know you got some really advanced things that you're doing there. But you just talked about subject to. You took over your house subject to. What does that mean?
What it means is there's already a debt in place, right? So what a lot of people think is it's crazy. People think a mortgage and the real estate are the same thing. I think that's the most common misconception, that people do not understand that a mortgage and a house are not the same thing. A mortgage is just a debt instrument, right? So let's say I go to Joey and I say, hey, Joey, I want to go down to the grocery store and I want to buy peanut butter and jelly, condiments and bread and all that stuff. And I want to come back and make a sandwich. I need $20 to do that. So Joey goes, yeah, no problem. When we create a document that says I owe him $20, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I come back to the house and I'm making my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, does Joey own that peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or do I own that peanut butter and jelly sandwich and just simply owe Joey a debt?
Yeah. You just owe him the debt.
No,
Right.
what kind of jelly is it though?
It's grape jelly. It's like something you probably wouldn't want.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely yours.
Right. So
Continue,
what a lot of people think is like, when they go, well, okay, so you bought his house, but you didn't pay off his mortgage. How is that even possible? I'm like, it's incredibly possible.
Right.
What if I realize I don't like grape jelly on this peanut butter and jelly sandwich? I go down to my neighbor. I literally walk out my front door. I go to my neighbor. I go, hey neighbor, I bought all this stuff to make sandwiches, cost me $20. I don't want it anymore. I'll let you have all this. I know you're a fan of grape jelly, but you have to pay the debt to Joey instead of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds
Now
fair.
I can walk away, and they took over the debt that is owed to Joey. Right. So that's essentially, they bought that peanut butter and jelly sandwich for me subject to, they just took over the debt, but they enjoy the benefits of the sandwich. So for example, with a house, let's say you have a seller that says, you know what, either let's just focus on one, but there's two scenarios. It's either they have a lot of equity and they want really high of a number, or they have no equity and there's no way that a wholesaler or real estate investor can buy that property. And also, if there's no equity, then the seller can't really sell it on the open market without losing money, right? Because there's no equity, they'd have to come out of pocket.
Realtor fees, closing costs,
all that
fixing
stuff,
it
right?
up, all that. Yeah. Okay.
So let's say that I owe $100,000, hypothetically. Let's just real quick. So if I owe $100,000 on a house and I sell that property on the open market, I'm not going to get $100,000 in my pocket. The average cost to sell a property, depending on where you live, is about 8 to 10%. Okay, that 8 to 10% is 3% to a real estate agent who lists your property, 3% to the real estate agent who brings the buyer to the table, because as the seller, I got to pay both of them. And then I've got another 3 to 4% of repairs and lender credits and home warranties and all that kind of stuff that go into this deal, right?
Sure.
So if I pay all of this, I walk away with $90,000. That's fine if I owe less than $90,000. But what happens if I owe $100,000 and the house is only worth $100,000?
Yeah, you hold on to that property for 15 years, like Joey's rental house, right? He's got right now.
Right. You got one of these, Joey?
Oh man, I got a great peanut butter and jelly sandwich for you.
Love it.
Grape. It's definitely grape jelly.
It's one of those ones you don't want.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this scenario, a wholesaler or a real estate investor would call this seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, are you interested in a cash offer? And the seller says, yeah, I'd take a cash offer, but I want $120,000.
Right.
And
Why did he have a Southern accent all of a sudden, though?
I don't know.
Is that
I don't know.
just
Because we're talking about Alabama. I don't know.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, just all right. I'm with you.
So if you're looking at this deal and they go, well, I need to sell it for more than what I owe. I currently owe $100,000. Well, the investor, what would an investor want to pay for this? Investors probably
Like 50 or 60, maybe.
Yeah, he'd probably be about $60,000. In that scenario, the seller is going to have to cut a check for $40,000 to sell to an investor.
Yeah,
That's not going to happen.
and they're not going to do it.
Okay, so let me tell you a breakdown of what most wholesalers see on a daily basis. Most wholesalers, if you look at your lead flow, let's see, can you see this yet?
Yep.
If you look at your lead flow and you get 50 leads in a month, about 10 to 15 of those are okay. Meaning they have equity, they're reasonable, they have pain. You have about 10 to 15 people you can work on. The other 35 to 40, they don't have any pain.
Right.
Meaning they're not going through foreclosure. They didn't lose their job. The COVID didn't impact them. They have plenty of equity. They're financially secure. They're perfectly fine. They don't need a solution provider to come in and take their equity by providing a solution.
Right.
Which at the bottom line, that's all you're doing as a real estate investor is
100%.
providing solutions. So if there's no problem, you can't solve it.
Right. So the problem that is here, right? This is a problem, right?
They do want to sell. Yeah.
So check this out. The house I'm living in right now, how did I buy this house? This guy, he bought the property in 2003. So the house is about 17, 18 years old. So he bought it right when it was brand new. And he refinanced it and took out a bunch of cash in 2008.
How did I know you're going to say that?
Because, and how many houses do you think that are like that across the country right now?
Oh, tons.
Oh,
So all these guys that stuck it out, they refinanced it 2008 and they just held strong. They didn't walk away from the property to do a short sale, they just held strong. What's happened now is that it was a $410,000 house that went all the way down to about $250,000, right? So over about 12 years from 2008 down to 2009, all the way back up to 2020, the house now is worth about $390,000, $400,000. But because as we know, the majority of your first 10 years of a mortgage payment are primarily interest, he didn't really pay that house down much.
Right.
So he owed exactly how much the house was worth. So let's go through real quick
And for those of you that are listening, you're going to have to go back and watch the YouTube video of this because Pace's voice is going in and out because he's turning around and writing on his whiteboard. It's going to make a lot more sense when you watch it.
I'll talk only at the camera, but so I'm gonna break down this house, the one that I'm standing in right now, and then we'll talk about why it's such a big benefit. Like why would somebody pay $100,000 as a real estate investor? Why would you pay $100,000 for a $100,000 house?
Yeah.
Why the hell would you do that? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I bought some of that real estate in the past, and my wife asked me that question a lot. So I wish I would have known the answer that you're probably going to share with me.
Yeah, we're going to share it. So most real estate investors look at that $100,000. They go, I need equity, right? Okay. That's fine and dandy, but what you really want at the end of the day is you want cash flow and you want the ability to pay down the asset utilizing a tenant or something along those lines, right? So what I ask people all the time, I go, would you ever buy a property today for $1 million that's only worth $100,000?
No.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Would you ever jump out of an airplane for $1 million with no parachute?
No.
What if I told you the airplane was on the tarmac and grounded?
Okay, sure.
Yes. So same thing with the house. Go back to the house for $1 million. Would you buy a $100,000 house for $1 million if the payment on that house was $500 a month and you could turn around and rent it out for $1,200, $1,300?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Right? So sometimes the equity on the deal doesn't justify the position, right? The thing that justifies the position is the ability to cash flow on the asset, right? And allow somebody else to pay it off over time.
Which, wait a minute for a second. So you're pointing out something I think is what we're always talking about on the show is financial freedom is all about cash flow. It's not about hitting that one big deal on a wholesale deal. Like, oh man, I just made $50,000. Good for you. Go find another one. Right. Pre-show, you were talking about there's a hamster wheel that has to do with wholesaling. But I would contend that that's that person right now. You're driving to work and you feel like you're on the hamster wheel and you have nothing to do with wholesaling properties. But we're talking about creating cash flow. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, I wanted you to break that down further as to how that actually looks.
This gentleman that I bought the house from, his name is Dave, and he had his house listed on the market for $410,000. He owed $390,000. What's interesting about this, and this happens all the time, guys, so it doesn't matter if you're a wholesaler, doesn't matter if you're actually a real estate investor, this is an easy solution to provide. This is obvious for anybody that sees this, $410,000, if the average cost to sell a property with agent commissions and all that kind of stuff is 10%, do you think Dave is going to write a check to sell his house, or do you think Dave's going to have any equity?
Yeah. No,
oh, he's going to write a check. Yeah.
He's going to write a check, right? He's going to, let's say he's probably going to write a check of $10,000 to $20,000 to get rid of this property, right?
Right.
And I'll go through like why Dave wanted to sell his property. I'll give it to you. This is a really interesting story. So Dave's lived in this property for 17 years. Him and his wife, they actually want to move down the street. They see this new home community popping up, and Dave drives by this new home community on his way to this house, home from work every single day. One day he gets a wild hair and he drives over, he goes into the model home community, and they convince him to put $20,000 non-refundable deposit on a brand new house. Okay. But they qualify him, right? They qualify him and they say, Dave, we can qualify you for a brand new build and we'll start building tomorrow if we can get a $20,000 non-refundable deposit and you go off and sell the property that's currently on your credit, which is this property right here. If you can sell that house, get it off your credit, we can qualify you based on your income for this brand new home. So Dave goes home, he gets excited, tells his wife goes over, they walk the piece of dirt, they're so excited, they start imagining, oh my gosh, now they're emotionally invested, right? So they call a real estate agent's brand new, is a friend of a family member. The agent's like, okay, well, I see some comps in the area that are saying that the houses are selling for about 400 to 420s. Let's list it at 410. Well, the house hadn't even been renovated since 2003, so it was a little outdated, right?
Sure.
It's not worth 410 in the first place. And second place, she didn't even realize that the amount of money he had on his mortgage would have required him to write a check to get rid of it. Mm. But she couldn't educate him. A lot of people think that real estate agents have the answer to everything, and unfortunately they don't. So here they are 5 months deep into a 6-month listing. The new house is almost built. The new home lender's calling Dave. How are you doing on selling that other house? Are you close? We need to get the documents going on this new house. Dave's stressing out. So the real estate agent finally reaches out to me and says, hey, Pace, I know you do creative financing. I know you buy houses creatively. I don't really know what that means, but I've got to save my ass on this deal. It's a friend of the family, and I look like a piece of crap. I just realized, because we got an offer at $390. I just realized that if he sold it for $390, he'd have to write about a $40,000 check. Now, Dave, who just put a deposit down on a brand new home and is already planning on buying furniture and new TV and a barbecue, and you got to get that new Traeger grill and all that kind of stuff for your new home. Do you think Dave's interested in cutting a check for $40,000 to get rid of this house?
Not a chance.
Right. So real estate agent calls me. She says, save me. I don't care if I make any money on this deal. Just save me, save me, save me. I go, no problem. Let me talk to your seller directly. So I called Dave. And I said, Dave, it sounds like you're in a situation where you would have to cut a check for $40,000 to offload this property. How about I just take over the payments for you? I become the new owner, right? We go through a title company transfers ownership. I'm on title and I control the deed, which is basically the documentation showing that I'm the owner. And we just simply leave the debt that is owed to Wells Fargo. We just leave it in your name and I make that payment and I pay it off and you're just off into the wind. He's like, I love this. You're telling me you can buy my house, avoid me having to pay $40,000 to get rid of it. I can then go over and move into my new home. And wait a minute, the lender over here told me that we have to sell this house in order to get it taken off of our credit. And if you're going to leave it in my credit and you're going to leave it on my credit, how am I going to qualify?
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so easy, Dave. So I called his underwriter for his new purchase or his new home. And I said, hey, we've got this house. We're under a contract with Dave. I'm buying it subject to. She says, hey, no problem. Just show me 2 months of payments that he's not responsible for, the first 2 payments, and I'll take 75% of the $1,950. You guys see this $1,950?
Yeah.
That's his mortgage payment for the $390. She says, I just want to show that he's not responsible for it for 2 months consecutively, and I'll take the amount of money off his debt to income ratio.
There you go.
Right? So now he has 2 mortgages in his name. He has this mortgage in his name, but who's the owner?
You are.
You.
I'm the owner. I own the property. I get all the tax depreciation. I get all the benefits of this property. I get the appreciation. I get the mortgage pay down. I get everything. And I literally walked in this property by just simply giving the real estate agent a $2,500 referral fee, which I didn't even need to do.
All right. So the question that comes to my mind is, if you don't make the payment, if it reflects on him, not you, right?
That is correct. But that's why I do what's called a performance deed, which means if I don't perform, he gets the home back.
Explain that for me. Talk about a performance deed.
Okay, so what happens is when let me walk through this and I'll get on that because that's super important. I appreciate the question.
Okay.
So my payment on this house now is $1,950 a month. My original plan for the house was to rent it out for $2,950 a month because that's the rent rates in this area.
Oh, wow.
I would have made $1,000 a month cash flow on this property for literally $2,500 to a real estate agent.
That's a pretty good return.
Bro, I'm telling you, we get two or three of these a month. So if you guys go to my YouTube channel, you'll see me. I have this series called The Real Deal, where I walk through real deals that we are doing and show you guys the breakdowns. And hey, guys, I'm in the living room. This is exactly where I stood and negotiated with the seller, exactly where I took blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So I actually have a video on YouTube about this property and doing the walkthrough, and we were going through and updating it and decided we wanted to move in the house. Why did I decide I want to move in the house? Because we had a brand new baby at the time and my wife no longer wanted to live in our house with 2 stories. So we just simply are like, hey, let's just go move into this house. So I bought this house, never had my credit pulled, never pulled out tax returns, never pulled out my anything, no qualifications, never showed check stubs, never showed my bank account, nothing. I could have literally filed bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. I could have lost my home to foreclosure 2 weeks ago. I could have had the worst credit and still bought this house. And the interest rate is a 3.25% interest rate. So think about that for all the self-employed people out there. When we go out and try and get a traditional mortgage, good freaking luck getting a deal like this with zero money down.
Right.
Yeah, that's a unicorn deal.
Right, but it would be a unicorn deal for people to understand how many of these deals are out there.
So
All right, so that I want to ask a question about that. So it sounds fantastic. You got literally an inbound phone call from a real estate person who you have built a relationship. You became known as the creative finance person. Talk about the person that doesn't have that network, them finding this deal. Like how are they finding this deal, and potentially for themselves or for this rental arbitrage?
So I've literally done no real estate in my life. Okay. I know nothing about real estate. You can do this. Okay. All you have to do is go to expired listings. So a seller who put their house on the market and they couldn't sell it they're going to not have sold it for one of two reasons, right? So a real estate agent, they hire a real estate agent puts it on MLS. They can't sell it. It's one of two reasons. One, there's no equity, similar to Dave. They don't know what to do. So they just say, screw this. We can't get enough money. This happens all the time. What happens if you bought your house a year ago and you decide, I got to move, I got to downsize, I got to upgrade, I got blah, 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 blah. Happens all the time. Second thing is they might have just unrealistic expectations of where they want to sell their house, right? It might be a retired couple who goes, we will sell to you on the MLS, Mrs. Real Estate Agent, if you can net us $500,000. And the real estate agent's like, well, I don't think it's worth that, but I'll throw it on the market and see what happens. After 6 months, that listing on the MLS goes away and it becomes now an expired listing. That is public record. And it shows you that seller has pain. They wanted to sell their house. They have a reason to sell their house, but it could not be sold on the open market. I don't have to buy those leads. I don't have to do anything. I just have to go to expired listings. There's multiple websites you can find expired listings on, multiple websites. PropStream is one of them. PropStream's a really good one. So go there, get expired listings, and all you do is you call the seller and say, hey, I'm looking at your property. It looks like it was listed. Was there something you were looking for that you were not able to get on the open market? And that's it. That's the conversation. That's the question. You open up a dialogue and then you just say, would you be open to selling your house on terms? Do you think many sellers know what house on terms means?
No, not a chance.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a story. I probably tell this story 15 times a week to sellers. I call it my F-150 story. Have either one of you guys heard my F-150 story? Oh, it's so good. It's a true story. Check this out. So as you know, I was in construction. Now I'm going to get back, Russ, by the way, I'm going to get back to the performance tee because it's incredibly important.
All right.
I never forget a question. I love this stuff so much. All I want to do is answer all the questions. So I was running a construction company for years. I had an F-150 that basically got to a point where I had a little over 200,000 miles and it was starting to have more problems than the truck was worth. In fact, it got to a point where I needed to get new tires on it. And either one of you guys being truck guys, you'll know that tires on a truck are about $1,200 to $1,800, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm like, dude, the truck is not worth, like, okay, it's worth it for me, but I'm going to sell it and I'm going to see if a tradesman wants to buy it. So I go to kellybluebook.com and I find the value of the truck is only $5,000. And I'm like, dude, this truck has made my family money. We've gone on road trips with it. It has so much more value to me than $5,000. You know what? To hell with it. I'm going to see if I can find a buyer. And I throw it on Craigslist for $10,000. Do you guys think I sold that truck for 2 times its value at $10,000? No, I didn't even get a single phone call on it. And 3 months later, my wife comes into my office. She very politely taps me on the shoulder and she says, hey, sweetheart, your truck is blocking our driveway. And I think it's time that we get rid of that truck. Very, very sweet. And I go, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to just dump that thing. And she says, well, have you considered just maybe accepting payments on it instead of just getting a lump sum? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. So I go back to Craigslist and I change one thing, literally one thing. And it says F-150 will take payments. I had to turn that ad off within 30, 45 minutes because so many freaking people were calling me. Okay. Now, Did I sell that truck for $10,000? No, I sold it for $12,500. But why? Why did I sell it for $12,500? Because I was willing to accept payments against it rather than requiring a lump sum. I ended up selling to a gentleman named Jose, who was a painter. Jose didn't have credit. In fact, he had some bad credit. So Jose gave me $1,000 down and made me $200 monthly payments until the truck was paid off. So I sold something for 2.5 times its value because I was willing to give somebody terms. So you see how easy that is to understand on an F-150 story? Absolutely. That's how I talk to sellers. I tell that story that's what I told Dave to get this house. He goes, I don't quite understand terms. I go, well, if you're willing to let me take over your payments, I'd be willing to pay you $390 when everybody else is basically willing to pay you $360. I will overpay for the property if you give me the value of the debt that is already existing. And that's what I try and tell sellers. I go, I'm not buying your house. I'm really just buying your existing debt. That's what I want. I just want to go and accumulate all these 2.5% to 3.5% interest rate loans and let renters pay them off and build my wealth. So
that's a brilliant strategy to cash flow. That's what I really was hoping that we'd bring.
And really,
the value
your wife
today
is to thank for all of this.
Yes, exactly.
It became an addiction because it's like, now I want to buy everything subject to. I'm like, I go to the grocery store. I'm like, can I just make you guys payments on this stuff? Like,
That's right.
It's crazy what you can do with subject to. And subject to is not just buying a property subject to, it also is any other lien or any other issues with the property. So we bought a property down in Chandler, Arizona, a couple months back where the house has a mortgage, right? Chase Mortgage it owes a debt on the house. So we took over that debt. We also found out that there's a $12,000 lien against the property that in a normal transaction or as a wholesaler, that might have killed my deal. The $12,000 lien was an air conditioning company that was never paid for installing an air conditioning system. So we just simply called the air conditioning system and we said, hey, we're going to be taking over the $12,000 debt and we want to structure payments on the deal. And so I make a $100 monthly payment to an air conditioning company for 0 interest. And I made it so I didn't have to pay the $12,000 debt right up front. So I let my new tenant in the property pay down an existing $12,000 AC unit. So I bought the house subject to and the air conditioning unit subject to.
Oh, man. All right. So I want to ask the question about performance deed. And then I do want to find out if this is only residential wise, or is this something that applies to commercial? And then we got to let you go because this is something that we can go on and on and on. By the way, Pace is in our community. So we're going to make sure Pace shares more about this, and we're going to give you guys access because Pace has created a pretty amazing course. So if you want to go right now to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/sub2, SUB2, you're going to get access toward all of his content.
Is that 2TO or the number 2?
That's the number 2, man.
Sub 2, SUB, the number 2.
All right. All right, Pace, tell me about performance deed, because I can already hear my wife in my ear going, but Russ, what happens if they don't pay off our mortgage?
It's the best thing that could happen to you. In a normal situation, if I default, right, could take 3 to 9 months for me to get foreclosed on because now I'm the new owner. I have to be foreclosed on. It's not like you can just simply say, hey, can you please give me the property back? You have to be foreclosed on. However, I have an instrument called a performance deed. What that means is that if I default on day 31, the property will be deeded back to the original seller. So the worst case scenario is that the seller gets the property back. And who does that instrument? Who handles that instrument mechanically is a servicing company. So every month, instead of me making that $1,950 payment directly to Wells Fargo, which is where that loan sits, I make that payment, $1,950 to a servicing company so that they can track and manage all of the transactions. And if Dave has a question about how his mortgage is being handled, he can always call the servicing company. So it gives the seller total transparency of what's going on and are the payments are being made. In fact, the servicing company, if Dave really wanted to, could get email notifications every month that his mortgage is being paid on time.
And do you, as a person who owns the house now, is in the subject to house, does the servicing company send you a bill?
No. We set it up with a servicing company. So the name of my servicing company is West Star Servicing.
Yeah.
They're nationwide. You set up a portal, and all of my properties I own are in the West Star portal, and I just go in there and I make the monthly payment, or I can set it up on automatic debit.
Got you. And then who pays for the servicing company?
So if it's me living in the house, I pay for it. It costs about $17 a month is all it costs. It's incredibly inexpensive.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Then if I have a renter, I build it into my rental fee or my lease option fee or whatever. It's the person living in the property essentially pays for it.
And if you did stop paying it, obviously the service company notifies the person who sold you the house. Then does that immediately start? Do they have the same foreclosure principles applied?
No, because there's a performance deed that the servicing company actually holds and controls. So what happens is on day 31, actually on day 3, Dave is aware that I haven't made the payment, right? Let's say the month comes around and on day 4, I haven't made the payment. Dave is aware that I have not made his mortgage payment. He's aware the whole time, even though he's not the owner of the property anymore. There's no financial benefit to him to know or don't know. Most of my sellers, just so you know, remember, do you know what the number one rule to create a financing is? Rule number 1 is cash flow everything, okay? Yeah. Rule number 2, don't put your brain in the seller's head, okay? And guess what, Russ? You would never sell your house to me subject to. So most of the questions and the concerns that you have are concerns the seller never does have. So I've literally never had a seller ask me to set them up on notifications with the servicing company. They don't care. They want to get out of the property.
Yeah. They've moved on. They're already cooking hamburgers on the new grill at the new house.
100%. They don't even think about the house. And in fact, Dave has been over to the house multiple times. I've become friends with a lot of my sellers, especially I ended up moving in the house.
Yeah.
Dave has come over and like, man, I love what you guys have done with the house, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we ended up renovating it because we decided to move into it. But if I didn't move into it, I'd be making $1,000 a month in cash flow in this bad boy. And here's the other cool part about this. Think about this. If I get a brand new mortgage, I'm sorry for anybody who goes out and gets regular mortgages. If I'm stupid enough to go out and get a regular mortgage on a house and pay full retail, I go out to Chase, Bank of America, Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage, whatever it is that you go to. And the first month's payment, you are now starting the amortization schedule from the very beginning. And the majority of my payment is interest. I took over this debt 12 years into the amortization schedule. What that means is that the $1,950 payment I make to Wells Fargo, about half of it is now going to the principal.
I mean, before you even said it, it came to me. Joey, it made me think of exactly, this is probably not, I shouldn't say this, but there's a strategy in our world where sometimes people buy an insurance policy and they have all the great intention to hold on to it forever. And something comes up in life and they call us up, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and they say, man, we're just not gonna be able to keep this any longer. And I guess we need to sell it back to the insurance company. And we say, there actually is a different strategy out there. You can sell it back to an insurance company or you can sell it to an individual. And, how does that work? Right. Well, it's just exactly what you're talking about here, Pace, is that the option is that you can potentially get a higher value, right? You sell it back to the company, they're going to give you a discount on it as opposed to someone else. Well, why would somebody pay more? And it's exactly what you just talked about is when I buy an insurance policy day one, I get about 70 cents on the dollar. But if I could buy one that's been in existence 3 years or 5 years, I may get $1.10.
We're talking about your 10-year-old policy, Russ.
Yeah. I may get $2. And so it made me think of that Joey and I were just talking about somebody that we're potentially about to do this on. And I was just thinking about that exact thing. Like, that's brilliant. Like, you're getting a 17-year-old mortgage or however old the mortgage is. Pace. All right. You have blown our mind. We've got to wrap this up because I'm telling you, I could sit here all day and listen to this, but I can't. And
we gotta get people that. So here's the thing. I want to just, before we shut off here, you've shown us example of somebody can get into this with no money.
Yeah.
Literally, I got no money and I just created $1,000 of cash flow per month. Like that's unheard of. But there's going to be some people that say, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of time. Like it may take me some time to find these kind of deals, to research it, to da-da-da. So are there also strategies for people that have less time and more money? How would you position subject to in that person's mind?
So if you have less time and more money, what I would do is I would find wholesalers in markets and let them know, hey, any of your tight deals or your deals that people are willing to give terms on, I'm your buyer for those deals. Or you go to real estate agents, they're everywhere. And you go to real estate agents and say, if you ever run into a seller that doesn't have enough equity to offload their property, I'm your buyer. Just bring those deals to me.
Brilliant.
So now you just create a funnel of people bringing deals. I mean, how did I get this deal? I literally played golf with this real estate agent one time and told him what I did. And then 6 months later, I got this house.
Man,
That's
It
so
doesn't
awesome.
take that much. I mean, in October, October, November, December, we accumulated like a little over 50 something properties all through referrals of people saying, I don't know what to do with this deal. What do you want? What should I do? And I'm like, let me talk to your seller. I'll structure something. We'll make it work.
All right. So really quickly, tell about your course, your coaching on subject to and creative finance. Just a couple of quick highlights because we want to, again, point people back to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/subto, SUBTO, so they can learn more about this and learn how to connect with you. But real quick, what are those highlights?
The only highlight I want to talk about is the only highlight that should be talked about. If you are a coach, you are a mentor of any degree, you need to be a practitioner. You need to be somebody that's actively doing the business. I've learned from people that are like, oh yeah, I used to do this 20 years ago. And then I'd pay for coaching. I paid this one guy $47,000 for this high level, thing. This is years ago. And then I got into the course and I realized it was antiquated, old, outdated stuff. He hadn't bought a property in 10 years. He was relying all his income on education. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a monkey see, monkey do kind of person. And so what happens is Russ made a reference to my Instagram a little bit earlier. My Instagram is just a documentation of what I do all day long, right? I'm up at 3:00 in the morning because I'm obsessed with what I do. I'm out in the field. I'm talking to sellers. I'm running multiple businesses. I'm running my construction. We're developing, and I'm accumulating rental properties. And then I'm figuring out how to make sure that I have tax shelters and all that kind of stuff, which is where you guys come in is in infinite banking essentially.
Yeah.
And I document my journey all day, every day. And I just teach people the ins and the outs. I go, here's this transaction. Here's the recording. By the way, I record every call, every appointment I have with a seller. So you can hear exactly how I overcome objections. And so I just share my journey. I let people sit on my shoulder and watch me do what I'm doing. And then I turn around and say, how can I help you do it on your own? That's it. I'm a monkey see, monkey do kind of guy. If you're learning from somebody who's not a practitioner, you're missing out. That's basically it. So if you guys really want to hear, because I'm a talker, like I could literally be here as well all day long. So I have two things that I do. One, I have a show called Wholesale Hotline. And every Monday night, Brent Daniels and Jamil Damji and myself, we do a free Q&A all about wholesale all over the country. We get about 800 to 1,000 people watching it live every Monday, 5 p.m. Arizona time. And then I have another show called Sunday Service. And Sunday Service is only creative financing. And so 2 weeks ago, I did a 16-hour live. I stood in front of my computer for 16 straight hours, 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. That was about 7 o'clock at night. No, it was 9 o'clock at night. 16 straight hours. I went through just answering questions. People would call in and say, call my seller and pitch creative financing to them. So I'd talk to them. And dude, that 16-hour live has had like 22,000 views in like 2 weeks. If you guys want to learn creative financing, go watch that 16-hour live. It's free. It's in my Facebook group. And it is absolutely crazy. I just stood there and answered everybody's questions for 16 hours straight.
Unreal.
That's awesome. Pace, thank you so much. And are you willing to share some more in our community?
So much. Love to.
Dude,
and I need to get you guys in my creative finance group so that you guys can talk about the infinite banking side, because it is such an important piece to all of this. There's so many people that just do not understand it at all. And it's kind of like creative financing where they feel if you guys could explain it in a 7-minute time frame, you would absolutely change somebody's life. But most people, they go, oh, creative financing, I'd rather just go do wholesale. And so you just watch people do stupid things with their money for years in and years out. And you're like, if you would just give me 7 minutes, I could change your entire future. So I need you guys in our community as well. Maybe we can do a live in a couple of weeks.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this. Thank you, Pace, for coming and joining us. And I appreciate the opportunity that we have every day to share with you. Have a great day. I love it when we get to hear what people would be doing if they got to financial freedom. The last one that I got to read, somebody said, I would be driving and picking up my kid every day from school. That motivates me.
That is why you need to be a part of the community that is seeking financial freedom. Go to community.wealthwithoutwallstreet.com. You can join for free today.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand